When Cyril Ramaphosa came to power, he promised a new dawn built on ethical leadership, accountability, and the renewal of the South African state. His message was clear. The era of rewarding politicians tainted by misconduct was over. Yet, in one of the most controversial appointments of his presidency, that promise now stands under serious scrutiny. Just weeks after removing Sisisi Tolashe from the social development portfolio, Ramaphosa has handed one of the government's most sensitive departments to Dina Pule, a former minister who was found by Parliament's Ethics Committee and the Public Protector to be dishonest and unethical. The Department of Social Development oversees hundreds of billions of rands in social grants. The integrity of the person heading it needs to be unquestionable. Instead, Ramaphosa has chosen a politician whose past remains synonymous with ethics breaches and abuse of public office. This definitely must be Ramaphosa's worst appointment yet. Has the promise of renewal finally given way to the politics of loyalty? Hello everyone, welcome back to Joe Talks Politics. I am your host, Joseph Musia. Let's get right into it. To understand why this appointment is so outrageous, we need to go back more than a decade to the scandal that ended Dina Pule's first ministerial stint. Because unless you understand what happened then, you cannot fully appreciate why her return today is so extraordinary. Dina Pule's downfall began in 2013 while she was Minister of Communications. The controversy centered on the ICT Indaba, a government-backed telecommunications conference held in Cape Town. Investigations found that Pule failed to disclose her romantic relationship with businessman Phosane Mcibisa, who was involved in the event through his company. Parliament's Joint Committee on Ethics and Members' Interests concluded that she had deliberately concealed the relationship and had allowed Mcibisa to derive improper financial benefits from an event linked to her department. Parliament found her guilty of breaching the Executive Ethics Code and imposed its most severe sanctions at the time.
I gave the best I could do to do my job, and that if in the course of me doing my job I made a mistake, I am sorry, I apologize.
The Public Protector's investigation reached similarly damning conclusions. Then Public Protector Thuli Madonsela found that Pule had acted unlawfully, improperly, and unethically by creating a conflict of interest and failing to protect the integrity of her office. Madonsela also found that Pule had misled investigators during the probe and recommended that President Jacob Zuma take appropriate action against her.
Honorable Pule's conduct in this regard was unlawful. I also considered it improper that she tried to pass the buck onto her staff. I consider this on its own grossly improper and unethical.
Within months, Zuma fired Pule. Although she was never convicted of a crime, the findings of both the Public Protector and Parliament ended her ministerial career. It was already a concern that she had returned to Parliament and had been appointed chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Agriculture. But the ANC has appointed so many of its controversial members to chair committees of Parliament that no one in the opposition or media made a song and dance about her return. But Ramaphosa has just upped the stakes. This is not just another cabinet portfolio. The Department of Social Development is responsible for the livelihoods of nearly 30 million South Africans through social grants. It oversees one of the largest public spending programs on the continent. If there is one department where the public must have absolute confidence in the minister's integrity, it is this one. The appointment of Dina Pule sends an unmistakable message. Political standing within the ANC matters more than a proven commitment to ethical governance. If President Cyril Ramaphosa believed the allegations against Sisisi Tolashe were serious enough to justify removing her from cabinet, then appointing Pule as her replacement is difficult to reconcile. At the time of her dismissal, Tolashe had not been found guilty of wrongdoing by any formal body. The ANC's own Integrity Commission had not even completed its investigations. The president was entitled to conclude that the allegations warranted her removal in the interest of protecting the integrity of his cabinet. But that rationale collapses with the appointment of Pule. Unlike Tolashe, Pule was the subject of formal adverse findings by both Parliament's Ethics Committee and the Public Protector, which found she had acted dishonestly and engaged in improper conduct. If allegations were sufficient to end Tolashe's ministerial career, how can proven ethical breaches be overlooked in Pule's case? The most plausible explanation is political rather than principled. His action against Tolashe was to merely silence his critics rather than any belief that she was no longer fit to hold the position. As Deputy Secretary General of the ANC Women's League, Pule occupies one of the organization's most senior positions. So, was he under pressure from the Women's League? Was he simply trying to maintain delicate factional balances inside the ANC? Whatever the explanation, none answers the central question. Why appoint someone with this record when there are so many other experienced ANC MPs available? Her appointment inevitably creates the impression that the imperatives to preserve the Women's League's representation in cabinet outweighed the president's commitment to ethical leadership. It is precisely this conflation of party interests with the business of governing that has repeatedly undermined public confidence in the ANC. In these circumstances, it is difficult to avoid the conclusion that the president's decision was shaped less by an independent assessment of merit than by internal political demands of his own party. The ANC has spent years trying to convince South Africans that it has learned from the state capture era and is committed to ethical renewal. Ramaphosa's new dawn was built on the promise that competence and integrity would gradually replace patronage and factional considerations. The Pule appointment undermines that narrative. It reinforces a perception that despite all the rhetoric about renewal, political considerations still outweigh ethical ones when important appointments are made. For many voters, particularly those who abandoned the ANC in 2024 and are considering whether to return in the 2026 local government elections, this risks confirming a long-held suspicion that the ANC has changed its language more than its culture. That is particularly damaging because trust, once lost, is difficult to rebuild. Every appointment that appears inconsistent with the party's stated values makes future promises of renewal less credible. Perhaps the greatest political cost falls on Ramaphosa, personally. Unlike some of his predecessors, Ramaphosa has always relied less on populist appeal than on a reputation for judgment, restraint, and ethical leadership. His greatest political asset has been credibility. Critics may disagree with his pace of reform, but many have accepted that his intentions were fundamentally different from those of the Zuma era. Appointments like this erode that distinction. When confronted with a choice between political expediency and principle, it appears he ultimately chose expediency. This appointment makes it harder for Ramaphosa to claim the moral high ground when speaking about clean governance and accountability. History is unlikely to judge Ramaphosa solely on economic growth or coalition politics. It will also ask whether he fundamentally changed the culture of government after state capture. This appointment risks becoming symbolic of a broader verdict that while Ramaphosa spoke the language of renewal, he was unwilling and unable to consistently enforce its principles when they conflicted with the ANC's internal political dynamics. These are not the actions of a leader or a party that wants South Africans to forgive the mistakes of the past. They are actions that say, in the words of Jacob Zuma, "My loyalty is first to my party and then to the country."
Who came first? Was it a democratic country or the ANC? Who came first? Because I'm answering your question directly. Who came first? Who came first? Who came first?
Ramaphosa and the ANC seem to forget that it is similar actions that led to them becoming a 40% party after the 2024 elections. If they continue on this trajectory, the future holds very little promise. What do you think? Has Dina Pule paid for her past mistakes? Please share your views on this and other episodes in the comment section. That was another episode of Joe Talks Politics, and from me, Joseph Musia. See you in the next one.